To talk a little bit about some of the players in the guard, the player, again, I'll tie it into our earlier convo. The player who was our favourite is, it's like we're old school 90s 9-inch nail fans. We only give a fuck about Trent, mates. Starts and ends with Trent. Because basically that's the player we're a fanboy of, right? But I actually did a little bit of research on this. I was looking up some of your interviews and trying to find some comments you had. And the one thing that really stuck with me, actually, I thought this would be interesting for fans, is they might know, looking in the server, obviously it's a really good player. Wow, look at how interesting his style is and the strength he has on the edges. But one thing I found, as soon as I saw you say this, dude, loads of coaches would love this in a star player, is you said he actually is like himself. Even though he's really young, he is really motivated to study the game, and he writes down his own mistakes and VOD reviews his own games. Now, again, think of what I just said earlier, fans, about how really famous CSGO players who make more money than God don't even watch demos. Like, that's like a coach's dream. If you don't know, most star players, half the bloody argument is them telling you stupid shit like, oh, well, if I hit that headshot, the round goes totally different. Like, it's not the opposite, dude. And they even say if you don't know, behind the scenes, like, pro players are like some shit out of like fucking, what you got, Spinal Tap. They are beyond parody. They'll even say shit like, they'll be like, I don't need to VOD review it, I remember it. You know what I mean? Like, dude, people don't know how bad pros can be. Like, this guy sounds like a dream if he's a young prodigy and he's fucking studying the game. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, I think his line of thinking is incredible as such a young player, that it was like, when I first saw him, I was like, oh, like, do you study the game or like whatever? He's like, yeah, I'll watch stuff back with like my team and stuff. And like, he helped him as like, he was probably 16 at the time, where it's like, not only does he have this very good mechanical skill, just his like instincts or game sense or whatever you want to call it, it's spot on. Some of the things he does, like literally, I think the third round of the game, his first match with us was against Steel, and he one of the sickest pre-fire one-taps that I've seen in this game, where he won a 1v2 and Opper was holding him, and he was just like, oh, I bet this guy's holding me, and he literally just, one of the craziest shots I've seen. And that was like his first introduction to the scene at large and ours as well, that it's like, oh my god, this kid is going to be special. Where it's like, his ability to keep calm and just all these things are, a lot of the time it takes years or whatever to develop some of these things in players, or for them to understand it or really fit in. And for him to be so far advanced at such a young age, and having not played with a great IGL in the world, or coaches or role models or whatever, that's astounding. Like, there are very few people that you find in esports like that are people you can put up on that level. Twist.
Is that why you said that? I noticed you said he was like a once in a lifetime player. Yeah. That sounds like like you're over egging the pudding, but there's a reason why, right?
Yeah, I've got to work with very talented people throughout my career, including Twist. I played with Twist before he made a professional team in MDL. And it's like, you see these people and you're like, oh my god, like, this kid's raw ability, if you can look beyond, flaws or whatever, you're like, this kid has the potential to be special someday. Some of those people go on and they do great things, like what, Twist has done in Counter-Strike, and some of them fizzle out, or they don't, reach that potential. But like, it's great to see that happen, and for them to have good attitudes and, things like that moving forward. That, I think that's more important than a lot of things, is like, are you willing to have somebody be like, oh yeah, like, this is a way you could play this better, and then be like, oh shit, like, yeah, that is a good point. Or you can be like, hey, you should try to play this Crossfire better, like, stop chasing ecos, and they're just like, oh, fuck you. Like, that's a huge difference in players, and you see both spectrums when you work with, young kids and just, older adults and stuff like that in general.
Do you have any thoughts on Trent you want to jump in on, Gio?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, obviously Trent is incredibly impressive, and it's really cool hearing the way that he's spoken about. But someone who I got to interview was Net. And while he's not like a star player in the same sense that Trent is, and the role that he often takes on is not necessarily going to make him the star player anyway, listening to him talk about the way he views the game and just how he looks at it and studies and whatnot, like, would you say that there's a lot of similarities between those two? Because I was pretty impressed when I spoke to him, like, especially considering his background, where he played, I think he said he played like lacrosse and stuff in school. He was on the student council. He was doing this at he was going to go off to college to do this. And he seemed like a really like one of those kids you look at and you're like, you make me feel really unaccomplished at such a young age. Like,
he's the go-getter,
he was one of, he's like, you know, that valedictorian kind of like vibe.
Sure.
But like, he's also, you know, he's not like super as old as a number of these people, you know, in esports. I would still consider him, you know, young-ish, not as young as Trent, but like, you know, how do you feel about that? Because I feel like he gets overlooked a little bit in terms of receiving credit for a similar attitude.
I think there's a lot of people on our team in general that are like that get overlooked. That is why this team has been, you know, so special in terms of our rise and things like that. Is you have a bunch of people that nobody really thought about much of as individuals, or, you know, whatever, at different points, that it's like they bought into a system and believe in each other, and they, you know, put in the necessary work in spaces. Where it's like Net, we played a new split comp, and Net was like, you know, I've watched these guys play this, because he'll watch the individual roles that he plays from better players and then watch what they're doing and try to, you know, soak that up. So it's like, how can I be better? I'm going to watch this guy. I'm going to see what they do. I'm going to break this down. And he actually brought a new comp to us that he was like, guys, I really think we can do this. And I like kind of laughed. I was like, I don't know. Like, this is going to be rough. And he sat there and he's like literally explaining it. He's like, no. He's like, I'm pretty sure this is why they play the way they do. They're trying to deny this. They're doing this. Like, watch, like, when they do this. And he's like, I'm like, okay, let's watch this together. And like, as we're watching it, he's like breaking down the different things in it, that he's like, okay, you know, watch, like they do this because of this, and when this happens, this. So it's like that understanding is very, very good. And like, he is a very hard worker, that he's like, I'm going to try to be the best player in the world. And he's not just saying that, he's trying to put the steps in to become that. And that's what a lot of people are lacking. That it's like, if people listen to our comms videos, they know Mike does a lot of, you know, secondary calling, or, you know, motivation, or like things like that. That I will take a player like that over somebody that frags out a lot of the time, because you have to have these necessary pieces inside of a team, or else it's going to fall apart. You can't put 5-star players together and, you know, get results. Sometimes you can, but like a lot of the time, if you get 1 or 2 guys that are like, okay, they're going to be the guys that everyone's going to look at in terms of Sai and Trent. But, you know, I have Jonah that can flex everything I ever need him to and never complains about it. Gets overlooked. Net is one of the better Sentinel players in North America right now. That it's like, if Chamber wasn't a thing, you would see that more and more. That it's like, they get overlooked. So they come from other teams and they're star players on other teams. And they have to go through this shift where it's like, you know, if you truly want to win and that's what you care about, sometimes you can't have all the attention on you, or like as much. And the people that can buy into those systems are going to be the ones that go on to be, you know, great players. And the ones that can't, that they're constantly like, oh, well, like, I'm mad that this guy's getting attention and I'm not. Like, yes, there's a chip on everyone's shoulder and you're always going to have that happen, but like, those players are just as special. It's just they don't get the credit they deserve a lot of the time. And, you know, people like, you know, Kerrigan. Would FaZe be good without Kerrigan? Yes, they would be good. Would they have won a title without Kerrigan? No fucking way. Absolutely not. Yeah. That, you know, you don't respect things until they aren't there, or you put somebody else in that you're like, oh, this guy on paper is better, but like, oh, why aren't we winning anymore? Like, oh, you got rid of Steele, who would like helped you, like, oh, you're in a good spot to qualify for the World Championship. Let's just get rid of him before the LCQ. Like, oh shit, why did my team fail? Like, there's way more that goes on that people understand, and like every single player on teams, they're there for reasons. Like, they're not just lucky to get in some. I mean, some of them are, their names and everything, they carry it on, but like as this game goes on more and more, you're going to see the people get weeded out like that, and the people that truly care and put in the effort are going to be the ones that stay.
So, I feel like there's sorry, just to interrupt, like I feel like you just see time and time again in all sorts of esports, and there's always going to be teams that do this. And I honestly, it just never seems to work. And that is the teams that decide, you know what, our budget this year, like, we're going to make a super team. But their idea of making a super team is getting 5 quote unquote star players. And then everyone wonders why it doesn't work. It's because they're not greater than the sum of their parts. And it never, and it's always like the team that comes along and has maybe some like unknowns or some fresher faces along with maybe some veterans, and they just have really good synergy, a coach that works well for them. It's always that team that outdoes this hyper expensive team made of like all of the biggest names. And it's still like, it blows me away whenever I hear people who are like, you know what would make a really great team is like if we got this person. It's like, that's not how it works. It's not how it works.
I would even say, though, that's where, like, pro players are lucky that some of these convos always stay private. Because I tell you what, if you let pro players make teams, Gio, they would make so many of exactly these, like, pleb-level teams with, like, he's the best as well, but I'm the best, but we're all the best. It's like, the joke is half of them don't know themselves until they're 6 months out of a team. Like, oh, bloody hell, that guy really did create all the space when I was, like, the player coming in. Or, like, wow, I won every clutch because, you know, that guy comped to me properly and I knew where people were. Like, half this shit, like, people don't realise how much, like, even pro players themselves can be mad delusional on that stuff. Like, I've seen them actually push within teams to have someone kicked out and then upgrade to their friend who's a star player, and then you later find out, like, oh, you idiot, he doesn't even play that spot on that map, though. That's our best map, though. Like, that was the CT spot that we've just kicked that guy. Or the best one is, like, actually the thing we said earlier about utility is a great one. If people only knew how many players get, like, an extra 6 months or a year in a team, because they're just the one who knows all the smokes. Like, there are so many of that guy's teammates have just told him, and in the modern meta, by the way, you can even now and say, is go throw the bloody util. That guy can have another job for another year. Like, the joke is, like, in that scenario, it's like he says, if we're playing, like, Nuke or something, if you don't know how to do this specific outside smoke, we're actually fucked. Like, if there's only two of us do, our job suddenly becomes a lot more valuable. These are the areas, by the way, that people who are just good at the game don't stop and think about. They think to shoot people in the head is all the game's about still.
That was like a dream come true. I saw that like update in the smokes and being able to drop grenades, and I was like, if I was still a player, this is like
every IGL sport. That's the dream.
Oh my god! It's like I would throw full executes by myself and just let these young guys just run out, take heads. Or like you have two people that are throwing like four smokes that like. When that first happened, I like got excited and giddy that I was like, oh my god, this could be such a cool idea. But even now, you rarely see some teams like truly take advantage.
It's not utilized that much.
Which is crazy to me. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. It is not on the topic of smokes in CS, so this is moving away a little bit. But one thing that was discussed a lot when you guys went to Masters, which obviously in and of itself was a really huge thing, was a number of people theorized that if the Guard had not have had a bye, i.e. if you hadn't have won or hadn't have come into the finals of NA, that you would have maybe had a better chance of going further in the bracket at Masters because a number of your players had no LAN experience, and that would have been a good way for them to kind of get used to the environment. Do you personally think that that was a notable reason as to your performance at Masters? And what were your expectations and takeaways from that experience?
I think it's not fair to say that because we could have played groups in 102. Like you honestly don't know. I think the thing people overlook and they're like, oh, they went there and they bombed out or whatever, which like, yes, to be fair, we did, but it's like we choked against Optic. We were up, 11-5, we messed up an execute, and if we won, or 10-5 or 10-4 or whatever it was, that it's like, if we ran the execute correctly on the Marv Days round, we would have won that game 13-4, 13-5, 13-6, 7, whatever you want to call it, we would have won that game. And if, like, I think even they would admit that. Like, they could have brought it back, but, like, for us, I know for a fact, if we would have won that, we would have won that game. And then you have a completely different outcome. I don't think we lose to, some of these teams where it's like we had played some of them in practice and played very well. We were playing Gambit, we were playing Ascend, we were playing these teams even and exceptionally well. We smoked some of these, upper tier EU teams as well. We were in a very good place. Paper Rex, I feel like that's where the nerves really came in, that it was like, you don't play that playstyle very often where they just absolutely run it down. And one of the things you forget about on LAN, your sound isn't as good. Like, that's something I haven't been at a LAN since Flashpoint. And I completely forgot that, like, in-ears, you can run an extra, that's a known thing for LAN players. You can run an extra couple steps usually and they can't hear you.
You can do a lot more rush play if people don't get it.
Yes.
Like, whereas at home you just hear all your perfect sounds, no background thing. The mixture of all the complications of being on stage, etc., just mean that you get like famously, this is even used to be a real thing at Counter-Strike. Back in the day, if you ever had a tournament that was at one of those trade fairs, you just rush all the time, mate, because they can't hear the flashes going off. They can't hear, every sound cue doesn't go through.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing like at tournaments where if you were sitting across from people, like you would see people's faces light up when you flash them. Like,
Yes.
there's so many little things like that. And just, if you've never been yelled at LAN, if you like, this is your first big LAN, you use a big round, and like, you're like, oh, normally you'd be like, oh yeah, we're okay, but like, you have the other team standing up and screaming at you. Like, are you ready for things like that? And like,
sounds like the Paper X example was a good one though, dude, because of all the styles you wouldn't want to face if you're in this setting like that. That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, especially you don't play that. The closest that we had was early phase, and like, even then, it's not the same. Like, there's no style in the world that really prepares you for what Paper X does. That it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna hit out main here with double duelist in the first like 10 seconds. We don't care what's going on. And it's like, there was a thing in the Paper X game that they took a timeout in the first map, and I thought for sure, I was like, okay, they're gonna make an adjustment to what we're doing. We'd rattled off like five rounds in a row or something doing the exact same thing. So we're like, okay, they're gonna make an adjustment for this. So let's do this to counter that or try it. They didn't do anything. I don't even know what they talked about during the timeout. Like, we could have run the exact same thing 10 rounds in a row, and I think we would have won. Like, they wouldn't have changed. Like, it was mind-blowing to me. And I'm sure they talked about things and they had reasons or whatever. And fuck, for all I know, they could have taken a timeout and been like, yep, they're going to overthink this, guys. Let's just talk about fucking...
Mind game you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, it's just a mind game. They're like, oh shit, we're having trouble stopping this. Let's take a timeout, fucking joke about it, and maybe they'll stop doing that thing. Like, they could have a line of thinking that's like that, because you watch their bind. Oh my god, their bind is so sick. The way they play the Yoru with setting up flashes through the teleporter and things like that. Those guys are so advanced, and they don't get credit for, like, they're just like, oh yeah, these guys are idiot, they run it down. Like, no, watch their games. Watch their games. Some of the stuff they do, the setups in these rounds are so sick. But, like, if you don't get experience playing against that, it's very hard to live adjust. And the Ghost game on Haven was the same thing, where it's like, we loaded into that match, we saw the comp they were running, and we're like, holy shit, like, attack is about to be brutal. But if we can make it to defense, we averaged, 10 plus rounds against comps like this, because they're very heavy on one side. But like, we got embarrassed and made to look a fool against some of these things, even though it's like, you're one round away, or like one big swing round away from like potentially winning those matches. But back to the Iceland thing, the biggest thing was we played fucking Optic our first round. Very good chance we win that, we would have went on, and I'm not saying we would have won the event, but we would have done well. Our confidence would have been at an all-time high. We would have continued riding that, and I think we would have, placed very, very well. Our expectations going into that event were, we wanted to play up to our level. I don't really care about results, and I know that sounds dumb, but like, if we can play at 80% or better of what we're capable of, the rest will follow. And like, that's what we've preached a lot of this time, and like, our expectations were to go there and win. Like, we wanted to win the whole thing.
Sure.
But it's like, this is your first LAN, things like this. There's so many different things that like you don't accommodate for. And like, we just wanted to show up and play well. Everything else, it didn't matter. Like, as long as we went there and performed well, you don't have to look back on that for the rest of your life. And like, now, unfortunately, we do have to have that chip on our shoulder where it's like, oh shit, we really threw that. Like, we should have had map 3. This whole story should have been different. And like, for the rest of our lives, now we have to, deal with that. You have to look back and be like, God, like, the what ifs or whatever. And it's pretty brutal to like have that result,
I think you're onto something there with the philosophy coaching style, though, of like not being like it's about the win or the loss in the column. Because I actually think in general, like if people haven't thought it through, that causes more problems than it's worth. Like, I'll give you an example. What happens if you win the game, but you made all these stupid mistakes and errors, and you actually misplayed against a guy and he almost beat you with like dropping 40 or something? Like, in that scenario, you shouldn't feel great about winning that game. Maybe you're supposed to win easily and neutralize this guy. So like, and obviously we all know you can have the other one. You can have a loss where you actually play awesome. You get in the site, you get a million post plants, someone wins a miracle, couple of 1v1s, or does a fucking sick ult at a point in time. Like, as a coach, you don't want people focusing just on the W or the L. You want them to make essentially the calls that make sense within your philosophy, right?
Yeah, and it's the same thing ecos. Like, if you win an eco with one person alive, like, you've lost that round. I don't care. Like, and I think, people sometimes they'll win those matches and be like, oh yeah, we won. They don't care about it. Where like, I think you'll see better teams and better players go back and be like, guys, we have to cut this down, or whatever. And it's like, you either win or you learn, is how I've always said it. But you cannot, like, a lot of these rounds, I learned this back in CS, it's like, if you win a 4v1 or a 5v1 with one person alive, like, you guys fucked up. There's no way around that. Like, that should never happen, and you have to be critical on that. But one thing I've had to get better at through the years is I'm really bad at, praising the good things. I'm very good at picking out the bad things and doing that. But like, there's a lot of times, especially in this game, where you play a round to perfection. Like, you do everything right, you set up your lurks, your default works, and like, you just lose the round. And like, that's one thing I've had to learn to point out, especially to a young team, is like, that was perfect, guys. We play that round 10 times, we win that the other 9 times. Like, do not think that was bad here. Just, they got a kill off Rocket, or we got, a bit unfortunate with timing. We got collided by an op. Like, so many things can go wrong so fast, but it's like, that was still an excellent round by us. And like, we have to remember, like, even when you lose some rounds, like, that doesn't mean it was a bad round or you did bad things. It happens,
It's like remembering there are 2 teams in the server. Like, yes. It's not your fault for everything that happens.
Yeah, sure. And just, being able to credit other teams. So many people are like, oh, these guys are idiots. Why are they doing this? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, if you actually took the time to, set aside your ego and look at, yes, they may not have been doing it exactly right or, the right way, but, try to understand why they did what they did. And sometimes they have no reason. They are idiots, by all means. But most of the time it's like, oh shit, they were trying to do this, or this was their goal. And it's like, that's another step of development as a player, is being able to not be like, oh, these guys are just dumb. They would never do this, da 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 da. It's like, oh shit, these guys are trying to set up a tile trap. That's what they're doing. And then it just advances your line of thinking and everything the next step, where it's like, instead of being mad that they randomed you or got lucky or, all these bullshit keywords that people use, it's like, oh, they were trying to do this, let's do this. Or when we see this is their goal, let's counter that. And it's a healthier line of thinking, and you're going to be a step ahead by trying to do that. And a lot of players just don't get that.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.